Chris sort you out. Firstly, thanks everyone for coming this evening. It's as you might have seen, so from the email you got from me, I work up at Leeds Beckett University. I deliver on our whole range of different courses we do there. Funny enough, actually, Anna has just joined us this evening. Well, he's not just joined us, joined this evening, but Anna started at Leeds Beckett as well back in September, so it's good to see you, Anna. So, but we've also got Chris Chapman here from UK Coaching, so we've got a few people sort of you might want to take notice of and then ignore again the rest of your lives probably, but hopefully you've got something that's interesting to engage with. So Tags is currently doing our Master's degree in Sports Coaching at Leeds Beckett. He's also obviously as you've seen, the Player Pathways Manager, is that the title?
Yes, Player Pathway Manager.
And I told him, I did say to him, look, I promise you if we put this on, Noah's going to ask you about tackle height, so let's just keep that one.
That's it. There's a rule tonight that anybody mentions it, you're on the round at the bar for everybody. So yeah, we'll steer clear of that one till afterwards.
Yeah. So yeah, so Tags we've been doing part of the course, and I was just saying that Tags, I think it'd be really interesting for you to share some of this stuff at Otley, because I'm sure all the Otley coaches would be delighted and hear about it. So 3 of them turned up. But I just thought let's just open it up across the county, so it's really good that we've got so many people in from different clubs as well, so thanks very much for coming along. I'm going to shut my face and pass it over to you, Tags, and I think we're here till about 9ish, and then we'll see where we get to.
Yeah, definitely will. Thanks Andy, and thanks everybody else for coming. So as Andy said, my name's Martin MacTaggart, but only my mum calls me Martin. Most of you will know me as Tags. There's a few familiar faces in here, which is nice, just to kind of unpick some of that. And there's some nervousness as well, isn't there? Always nervousness when you have kind of these bright lights of Andy and Chris and Anna here. But yeah, so where did this come from? So Andy and I were having a conversation, a little bit of background about me. I started coaching, I left school at 15. There's a few older faces might remember O-levels. There's a few in the room that probably haven't got a clue what I'm talking about when I say O-levels. So O-levels pre-GCSEs. I left school just before taking my O-levels. I went into bricklaying. One day, turned up at my local rugby club. A school teacher friend of mine asked me if I'd give him a hand to coach. I gave him a hand to coach. Got hooked into coaching. That's 33 years ago now. So my experience has kind of been 33 years worth of working in community settings, working in county settings, and working in our pathway settings. And I've coached at various places and various levels, working with Isha and their development squads all the way down to working with a level 13 club back in my home county of Sussex. So a whole range of experiences, and Andy and I were having some conversations about what have I learned on my journey, and presenting back in one of our master's modules probably came to light that there's a few things that I think people might well find interesting. So that's where we've got to. So the art of play is what I'm going to call it tonight. And I kind of looking at the brief or looking at what we've sent out, it's like building a curriculum and then trying to take that curriculum into, well, how does that curriculum actually help a club hook together from top to bottom? So I'm going to share some of my experiences. I'll very much talk about the club that I'm currently at, which has probably had exactly the same experiences as many clubs up in and around Yorkshire. Post-COVID, 8 players. We were a level 6 club, 8 players. We're not competing at level 6 with 8 players. Pulled out of the leagues, went all the way back down to level 13, or level 11, sorry. We kind of jumped up a little bit. Got put back in there. We now have a wider squad of around 40 players in the last 18 months. Predominantly just hooking back into the Colts that had played and current Colts. So in many ways, probably a lot of those experiences that many, many clubs are facing. So some of what I'm talking about tonight will hook into all of that and try and connect those dots. So on my way up here, I started to think about how am I going to kickstart this conversation off? So many of us, how long have people been coaching in the room? 5 years? More than 5 years, put your hand up. And more than 10 years? So there's a few kind of around that 5 to 10 years. And I probably want to take you back to those steps when you first started coaching. And I was saying to Andy when we sat down having a coffee before coming over, and can you imagine during the war? There isn't too many people in there that remember that, thankfully. But they took all the road signs away. So you had no idea where you were, but you had a reasonable idea of where you were going to. And it kind of made me think about this journey that we're all on, that we're looking for wayfinder points. We're looking for things that are familiar to ourselves and looking for things that connect to what I'm trying to do. So it made me think about that. What would we have done if we had no direction, no sense of where we were going and why we were trying to get there? And I wonder in your worlds, how many of you are actually in that space? You know, do you really know where you're trying to get to? What's the end goal? What's the end product? And if you had some little markers, some way markers on the way, would it be easier? And that was kind of how I wanted to start trying to look at this. And, you know, all of us will have a different experience and all of us will move through that in different ways. So, wonderful systems nowadays. Onto my iPhone, tap in, Otley Rugby Club, 4 different routes to get me here. All within about 10 minutes of each other, 4 different routes. So you're starting to think, actually, we all have different ways of getting to the same endpoint. The journey may be very, very different, but the endpoint's normally the same. So I chose a different route that I've never been on before because I wanted to experience something new. And again, that kind of resonated with tonight. So I'm very, very fortunate. I work with Don. Don is, well, his title's on there, he's head of performance programs. And he and I were having a conversation very much around our pathway programs. And the quote on the screen was something that he said at that time. And it really resonated with me. And if we're creating really, really good experiences, people will want to stay. And are we quite clear and are we quite understanding on what that experience is that they're actually looking for? So I think fundamentally for me, this is true. If we can get this right, if we can hook into those experiences, we can provide them what they want within a framework, because we've all got frameworks that we need to follow. We've all got that end point, but our journey getting there will be very, very different. So that's kind of my starting point for tonight. Before we actually get onto that, actually, I'm going to just go back a slide. A little task for us to do first. So can I get into 4 groups? Just 4 groups. You lead one group for me, please. If you can lead another group. We'll go, you lead a group and you lead a group. What you've got in there is a jigsaw puzzle. So I just want you to get into some small groups, 3 or 4 people in each group, and I'd like you to complete the jigsaw puzzle. I'm going to be really, really kind because I think the maximum is 16 pieces in one of those jigsaw puzzles. So and you're probably thinking already, why is he giving us a jigsaw puzzle to do? Well, it'll become evident as we go. Now, I purposely haven't given you the pictures. Okay, just hold it there just for a second for me. What I found really interesting just watching there is kind of some similarities to the approach, but some differences. And that's what I was talking about earlier about we all have some experience in here, but our experiences are going to be very, very different. That's brought us to this point. So look at them, look, they're so competitive. We're kind of having a conversation, but they've got to carry on, haven't they? It's straight in it, isn't it? So So who started off with saying, right, okay, let's just get all the edge pieces out. We're just going to push all the edge pieces out. We'll try and hook the edge pieces together, and then we'll start from there.
Yeah, we did the corners there.
Pretty much everybody's doing that. Yeah, great. So no matter what our different experiences, whilst we've got different experiences, we're all approaching this from a similar lens. So the answers to every question you've got are in this room. So I want to hold you onto that while you finish off your puzzles. The answers to this are in the room.
Sky. Is there a price for I'm not convinced. These are all part of the same jigsaw. Yeah. We've got others. See what this does. You'll just sat with our faces.
You got the easy bit.
They're missing it.
Okay, let's, I'm just going to pause that there for us. I'll get you to finish it off later. But this is kind of the situation most of us find ourselves in, isn't it? So you're involved in this club. You've got a whole wealth of experiences and knowledge and understanding. But we very rarely share or talk to each other about what that knowledge or understanding is. So what was the first thing? One of the groups, I think it's about 12 pieces, had all of their pieces in the bag. Completed it quite quickly. How early did any of those get up and then go to look to see, can I help somebody else? So they had all the answers to all the problems and all the questions, but I'm holding on to that knowledge. I'm not sharing my knowledge with anybody.
Does that mean that table's like the chair and director?
Well, it could. That may well be the experience in your space. So, and that's kind of where a lot of us live, isn't it? We've got people who know all the answers, but we're not really sharing what some of those answers are or the potential solutions to some of the problems. Group over there found out very, very quickly. We've got some stuff here that isn't ours. I think it looks like that table. We'll share and start to have some conversations. So the idea of that game is just to try and explore that and say, actually, 9 times out of 10, the answers are in the establishment that you're in. What we've got to try and do is connect the people in the establishment to start to have those conversations. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that was my starting point. Is that we've all travelled on these different journeys. We've all got to this place at different times. We've all had different experiences, whether that be playing, not playing, coaching children, not coaching children, coaching adults, not coaching adults. We've all got different experiences, but we all share a same love of a game. And the game we are talking about here today is rugby. So one of the things that contribute to our awareness, our knowledge, our understanding of what needs to happen in order to help our players be better. So I'm just going to share some of the things that many of you would have seen on some of our official coaching courses. So first and foremost, principles of play. They don't change, do they? Fundamentally, when you watch a game of rugby, you will see that happen. Even on Saturday, we saw that happen. Okay, so fundamentally, that exists. That kind of really, really helps us understand the flow of the game. From a very, very simplistic level, whether you've got the ball or whether you haven't got the ball, those are the things that you will notice. Those are the things that you'll see. The second thing is, when was the last time anybody did a coaching course in here? So if we talk about our coaching award or our advanced coaching award, or some of our CPDs around our Kids First, how recently have people actually attended?
Advanced advanced last season.
She did advanced last season. Advanced at the moment.
2 years.
19.
So, has anybody not seen this previously?
No.
So fundamentally, I'm going to try and explain what this is. So for me, if we go back, we've got the way the game is shaped, the kind of things that we will see, whether you've got the ball or whether you haven't got the ball. These are the kind of processes that players will go through. Underpinning that, sorry, let's go back. Underpinning that, we've got this, our interconnected components. So these are basically, the game is at the centre, and we've got these four kind of pillars, or these four pillars that sit around it, to help us understand what players need in order to play the game. So let's unpick what some of those are. So game fitness. What do we mean by game fitness? It's very, very quiet. People don't want to talk.
Physical ability aligned to the level they're sort of trying to play the game.
I really like that physical ability rather than being really, really descriptive about it's a level of fitness, but physical ability, because physical ability brings in a lot of other things, doesn't it?
It could be walkie rugby or touch rugby or wheelchair rugby or whatever.
Even better. Absolutely. And for me, what game fitness is can I jump, can I twist, can I turn, can I hinge, can I squat? Can I resist movement? Can I move forward? All of those movements, can I jump in the air and catch a ball? So they're all the physical components that help me play the game of rugby. Let's jump over to actions. What do we think actions are?
Passing, kicking, catching.
So you might term some of them as skills, but they are actions that happen in a game. Yeah. So we've got two of those sorted now. Let's go back around the other side, the behaviours. What are the kind of behaviours that we expect from our players? So treads might sit in there, definitely. You'll see some of that.
Is it things like resilience?
Yeah, I mean, you can go into some of that. We try not to use the word resilience because there's some negative connotations with what we see resilience. But yes, you could determine that. So how are people communicating with each other? What is their application to training? Are they invested in their own learning? Are they eager to learn? They're kind of some of the behaviours that we can support players in. So how do they respond to challenge? Might be something that fits in that behaviour space. So if you think back to, I want you to think to a moment in time when you were coaching a player and they responded in a fairly negative way to something. How was it termed earlier today? Had a face on. It's a real good Yorkshire phrase, that one. Oh, he had a right face on. That made me chuckle when I heard that one today. But you know what? You can. I'm pretty sure you can see in your mind this player who suddenly responds not in a normal fashion, throwing his toys out the pram. He just doesn't respond to the challenge. Our job is to help them understand what that challenge is and how they respond to that challenge. So that's behaviour. Top bit, game readiness. What might you understand by game readiness?
Understanding, the players need to understand the laws of the game. Mental fitness.
Definitely some spacing around the laws. So you were saying?
Mental fitness. Mental readiness.
Yeah, that would definitely fit in there as well. Sorry? Yes. I'd place that one in behaviours. Are they ready to train? Are they packing their own bag, or is mum still doing that for them, or dad's still doing that for them? For me, what game readiness is how often do I get to practice the bits that happen in a game? So how are we helping the player ready to play the game he's going to play? So an example might be, let's pick something really, really easy, the scrum. How often do I get to practice the scrum that is in the game? So if I'm not practicing it very often, they're not really ready to play. So what am I doing to prepare them to play the game, that game readiness? When we start to put all of those four moments together, that's what feeds us into the game. And what's crucial for me is that is how we start to think about our curriculum. So we go back, we've got the principles of play, and we'll touch a little bit more on this in a minute. And then we've got our interconnected components. So before I go into this next bit, so you can see here, I've kind of circled this, and there's a reason for that, and we'll come on to it in a slide shortly. Just trying to get some people sharing some stories. How do you see the game played for your level? So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to have a conversation with somebody. How do you see the game? Because we'll all see it through a different lens. So who's coaching kind of under 10s and down? Anybody 10s and down? Nobody really in here. So between 12 and 14?
14.
There's a few here at 14s. 14 to 18? Most of the others, any seniors? Working with seniors as well? So you consider some really, really good experiences here. What I'd like you to do is just share with the person next to you how you see the game played. And the reason for it is I want you to imagine you're speaking to a friend who's never seen a game of rugby before. They're not going to see the game of rugby. How are you going to describe the game to them? How do you see the game played? Just give you a couple of minutes each, so about 4 minutes. Just share how do you see the game played. Cool. What I'm going to do there is just want to try and dig into some of those points that you just started to talk about, and just find out where there's some commonality, and then try and find out where there's some differences. So, table at the back. What was one of the things you talked about?
Panic with moments of brilliance.
I'm loving that. I'm wondering how you're going to explain that one to your players, but I'm actually loving that. I think that's pretty cool. What about this group here? What was something that came out?
We were talking about getting the ball, so contesting for it, winning the ball, and then you have to get into the other team's half and try and get over the line to score points. And when you've got the ball, you're trying to get it back or stop them getting into your half to score points over your half.
So a really, really simplified version of the game.
We talked about how big the pitch was as well. So it's a really big pitch. You've got 15,000 each time. So there should be spaces you need to either defend or try and attack. And there's various ways you can do it by kicking it, passing it. We didn't say pass it backwards, but yeah. So we tried to start it off simple, but then try to expand it.
So then we're layering in some complexity. So we'll touch back on it. What about group at the back?
Skin pretty much gave us a textbook explanation of how the game works. And I tried then started querying how do you coach your team to play more game, what your rugby philosophy is. Different people have different ideas around it.
We'll definitely touch on that in a second, 100%. What was the explanation you gave about that stranger, that textbook explanation?
He was still rambling on until we get
Just give us a short snapshot of that if you wouldn't mind.
Well, I think he started about when he starts with a team with so many players with a ball, and the objective is to get a ball over the line, and the team have got to stop them, and if you've got to pass it backwards, and do knock-ons and scrum. I mean, I was in a different place. I was like, I was thinking of it more of a point from why would someone come to the game? So I coach teenage boys, right? So the first thing that came to my mind is you could smash other boys legally, all right? Because like some people come and play rugby because they like the physicality of the game. And for others, you can run round people. So it's like my mind was going. It's a game for all shapes and sizes, kind of.
Cool, and I'm loving it. What about two gentlemen at the front there?
We were sort of looking at the game through the lens of Rob and I's different experience of coaching girls, teenage female players, and trying to explain how you coach a game readiness when you don't have all your players every week. In fact, you probably have half the players you need. How do you develop behaviours, game fitness and actions when you can't do game readiness?
Yeah, absolutely. Prioritisation, isn't it? You come into some priorities, and we'll definitely unpick some of that as we navigate our way through. Fascinating that we all watch the same game, but we all see it slightly differently. We all have different descriptors that we use, and that's quite an important point. So within your clubs, a player might go through 5 or 6 different coaches that use a different descriptor for what's essentially the same thing. And we wonder why our players sometimes aren't on the same page as us. So straight away, some commonality in the language we use and the descriptors we use will really, really help. Now, by no means am I saying from top end of the club down to the bottom end of the club, everything should be the same, not by any manner, but there should certainly be some contextual reference points for them. So I'm just going to share with you, this is how I see the game. So this is basically my principles of play. This is how I see the game. So you start off with a contested possession. You either win the ball or you lose the ball. You might then maintain your ball. So if we take this bottom end here, we contest, we attack, we contest, we attack, we contest, we attack. We might lose the ball, transition to defence, contest, defend, contest, defend. So it's continual mini cycles of the game. That's how I see the game. And I shared that with my players. I basically said, look, this is the way I see the game. Do you see the game any differently? And actually, when we stripped it back down, no, they didn't. So now we can understand how I see the game. Oh, by the way, a number of you are probably looking at and going, what's the scan, act, adapt? That sits in the middle. That's a decision-making process for players. By scan, I mean not just look, but I hear and I also feel. I think one of the most underused things is we never talk about what did your gut tell you? What decision did you make? What did your gut tell you? We don't use that gut instinct, and I think it's a critical piece of that decision-making process. So the scan is what's available to me, what's somebody telling me, what am I feeling, what am I seeing. The act does what it says on the tin. I am going to do something with that information. Did it work? Didn't it work? It did work. I'm going to carry on doing it. Didn't work. I'm going to adapt. I need to try something different because that didn't work. So that's just mine. That's how I see the game. That's the decision-making process that I put in the middle. Has it helped me? I'd like to think it has. Has it helped the players? I think if they were sat in here right in front of you now, they would say, yeah, definitely. We're on the same page. We now know what Tags wants. We now know what Tags is looking for. We can see through that same lens. It may have some differences on things, but we're now all on the same page. It makes a massive difference. So then what do we do with that? Now that I've got this way that I see the game, what's next?
Drill down into some of those boxes. How do we contest possession? How do we attack? How do we transition?
Absolutely. And
Win the ball.
then basically what I'm then saying is I'm coaching adults at this moment in time. So I've got the adult laws. The vast majority of people working in this room are working in the age grade game, so you'll have regulations that fit around those laws that are bespoke to your environment. An under 13 can't do, or an under 14 can't do what an under 16 can do. There are variances in the game. So you have to understand the context in what you're doing. What does that look like for me? What does good contested possession look like for a 14-year-old? What is my expectation of a 14-year-old at contest? And I think that's critical to understand that. I'm not looking at the best international player and using that as my reference. It bears no relevance to the 14-year-old that struggles to maintain his own body weight. It looks very, very different. So what's it in my context? What am I expecting him to be able to do? What does good look like? And I think the thing we kind of lose a lot is when we start to look at curriculums. And by the way, curriculum is quite a bad, people use it as a bad word. What curriculum actually means is learning journey. So we take, this is just about applying a learning journey and placing it into places that are relevant for them. I think we start to really unpick. So what does it look like? So I started to ask myself these questions. Can we agree with that as ultimately the aim of the game is to score more points than the opposition by the end of the game?
If you go back to what Don Barrow's quote at the beginning about making it the best experience, well, there's all that survey stuff around the particularly junior and I think it runs into culture. It's more the quality of the experience than the actual result is a key driver of their player retention and they're coming back to do it again.
100%. I mean, it's really easy to kind of winning and talking about winning became quite a dirty word for a while. And that's, you know, nobody plays sport to lose. I've yet to meet the person who goes on the pitch to lose. Winning is important. Helping players apply their learning so that they're more able to win is the quality of experience. Players can accept losing as long as they know that they're learning, as long as they know that they're moving forward.
I think your reaction as a coach to the result, and everything when I started this myself, feeds into the group. Most groups follow their leaders' characteristics as a group.
100%. I don't coach the same way today as what I did when I first started. You know, my learning experience, I think I was saying earlier, every time somebody made a mistake, I was making them do press-ups, run around the pitch, run around a post, all those kind of punishment culture. That was my learnt behaviour. Coaches, that's how I was coached, therefore I thought that was good coaching. It's only because I didn't think that was right and I started to investigate other ways, I found new ways to do things. So you're 100% right. How am I engaging with the athlete in front of me, the person in front of me? And they'll all want different things. We'll touch on that as well a little bit later, no doubt.
I think there's the fundamental principle of the game, right, is to score more points, right? If you articulate it as a sport, but you're dead right that can be superseded if you play tag rugby with 6-year-olds by the quality of the experience. There's also the role that a lot of us play as community coaches, which is get the kids to come back the following week and you know, get as many kids involved. So, you know, all of us will have faced the challenge between winning versus giving everybody an equal opportunity to play, you know, making sure that you're developing your development players. So there are many, many different facets to what the game is about, different age grades and different stages.
100%. As I say, I'll share some of my experiences. I said at the beginning, we had 8 players after COVID. We've now got quite a large squad. That whole squad are aware, I rotate. I go on a 3-week basis and I rotate. They're all aware of that. Irrespective of ability, irrespective of what the result is, we rotate. Because I can't afford to have only 18 players. So we as a club, we as a group of players accepted, we would rather finish mid-table or towards the bottom of the table, but everybody has equal opportunity. Everybody plays, and we can always put a team out week in, week out. That's the compromise that we have accepted.
I think the difference is, you know, that undoubtedly that's the objective of the game, and that's why you make the decisions you make on the pitch. You don't decide to go left into the defence because you don't want to score points. The game changer in a curriculum, as you've described it, is it's which bits you celebrate. If you're going to spend all your time talking about how brilliant it was we won, but actually, I think what you're proposing is you need to talk about how brilliant Billy did, or Sarah, or Michelle, or Louis, or whoever it is. Celebrate the success of the individual rather than the win of the team.
100%. I think there's the environment we create, which is very much that. How are we talking to our players? How are we celebrating? How are we providing challenge? You know, I'm sure many of us will have, or might well have seen that classic bell curve of over here it's really, really easy, kids get bored. They want challenge. Over here is really, really hard, I get stressed. I walk away. I stop participating. I'm at the session, but it's too hard, I'm just not going to bother. Those two areas there are really tough. And we've got to try and find a real challenge point in the middle that gives them enough challenge, enough stretch to help them be better, while still gaining success. Because we don't want to operate in those two ends, do we? The boredom and stress, we want to try and get away from. That's the environment that we're talking about. Environment is critical. What helps us design the environment is knowing what we're going to do and when we're going to do it. Because if we're really, really clear on our planning there, it gives us free headspace to do the other bits. So coming back to this here, this is how I see the game. This is, for me, the end point. I want to try and score more points than the opposition. So I have to try and think about, well, what is it I'm going to do as a coach? What is it, and how am I going to engage with my players to ensure that they know what we're trying to do? So I just threw questions at them. How do we progress the ball? In order to score, we want to score tries, but we also know that we can kick for points. How do we get the ball closer to that line to either score with a kick or get over the line for a try? What are the different ways we can score? What skill sets do we need to be able to score? Drop kick, kick, all of those kind of things, the different ways to score. Are we quite clear on what they are? Defence is quite simple for me. How do I stop forward momentum? And then the contest is self-explanatory. How do we recycle the ball if we've got it? And how do we win the ball back if we haven't got it? So as soon as I start to put those questions to the players can come up with the answers to them. It's not me designing this curriculum. These are my players. I asked these questions. Here's what they came up with. Guys, I'm quite happy to share all these slides with you at the end. So, you know, if you're making notes, it's fine, but you can have all of these slides at the end.
So I suppose, Taxi, I mean, I've had these sort of conversations with a mate of mine who's a very good basketball coach. He loves putting up videos of these cool things his basketball players are doing, and I'll say to him, well, you try and do that when it's 1 degree outside and you haven't got anywhere indoors to go and do it. So presumably this was an indoor task you did, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
We just sacrificed a week's worth of training to get us all on the same page. Because getting us all on the same page and all pointing in the same direction. So in this meeting, I had 5 age groups. I had the seniors and everyone from 14s upwards. So 14s, 15s, 16s are colts and seniors. We had players and coaches in the room. So the under 14 players are over there and they were talking about this from their perspective. What does this mean to me as a 14-year-old? The ones on there are mainly the senior ones because that's the team that I am coaching. So I typed them up for our team to share afterwards. But let's be honest, your 14-year-old will pretty much come up with most of those as well. The difference being is the physicality that he is able to do, or what physical strength or what physical abilities does he need in order to complete those tasks. So there's nothing in there that's shocking, is there? So there's our curriculum. That's how we start to build our curriculum. I'll apologise for these next 4 slides. I think it's the next 4 slides. Are them how I presented it back to our seniors. So we just turned and said, right, in attack, we need to pass, catch, carry, kick. We've got some descriptors of what we wanted them to do. And then I just placed some nice pretty pictures that explained what I was asking them to do. So that's in attack. When we're contesting, what are the skill sets that we need to be able to do? We need to be able to jump and catch, we need to be able to jackal, we need to be able to tackle, we need to be able to have good foot movement. Tackle, 3 things that I focus on. Everything starts with the ability to track your opponent. It's probably the one thing, how many in here actually do that? Work on actually physically being able to, can I mirror the person who's in front of me? Can I track him effectively? Can I, as a group of connecting 3 players together, can 3 players move and track players and ball movement effectively? Because it fundamentally underpins defensive structure, being able to track. Foot movement. Can I get good foot movement when I get in close? Can I get my body close to them? What's my foot movement look like? How are we developing the foot movement? We came back earlier to gain fitness. Good foot movement is fundamental to being able to complete a tackle. So if we do no work on foot movement and we're questioning why our players can't tackle, we've probably got to look back to, do they have the physical capability to tackle? And am I helping them be the best that they can be? From a set piece perspective, there is nothing in there really apart from probably the lift that doesn't actually fall no matter what age group. As soon as you start scrummaging, all of these things, as soon as you start doing line out, it's only the lift that is different. So there's our curriculum. Quite quick and building that, wasn't it? But let's go back a few steps. Where did it all come from?
Principles of play and interconnected components.
So fundamentally, yeah, there is a way the game looks like this. There are 4 key pillars that sit around the game that help the player be ready to play. Then what do we look at? Do you remember what we looked at next?
How we see the game.
How you see the game. I think it's really, really important that people know how you see the game. Now, my model is my model. You'll probably be sitting there thinking, I've got my own model in my head now. I've got something I think I can do here. That's great. Develop your own models, because if it's yours, you'll own it. If your players own it with you, God, they're going to work for you, aren't they? They know what you're looking for.
That gives you players a why as well.
I think it does. That's
Why are we doing this in training?
it's connected back to the game. So fundamentally, here are the things that I look at. So got the interconnected components that sit in the middle. I've got my game model. I've got my actions in attack, defence and contest. I've got my behavioural things that I stick in there. So these are actually drawn out of the England Rugby Development Framework. But there are 4 that we, as a group, when I shared them with the group, that we felt were really important. Being self-aware, that was huge. Seeking challenges. There were 2 of probably the big ones. When I'm under pressure, how am I going to behave? How can I help that person manage the pressure that they face? And then the bottom right-hand side is the physical skills that I want to develop. So I develop my own kind of physical connections around what is it. So if we have a look on there on tackle, it's squat, hinge, grapple, rolling, tumbling and rebounding. They're the physical contributors to helping my players be better at tackling. We actually do more of that than we do tackling. So that's how we start to develop a curriculum. So I'm going to try and pause there for a little bit and just take any questions. What I'd also like you to do is probably in your small little groups, is start to work with somebody else and unpick some of that stuff for you. What does that now look like for you? What is it triggered in your thinking? Actually, do you know what? I haven't done that. Maybe if I did this, this would look very, very different. And then we'll come on to that next stage of, we've got a curriculum now, how do we plan? So just some short conversations in there. Obviously toilet, might be able to get another drink if people are struggling for another drink. But let's just have a bit of social time. Just kind of capture what what's just been shared as a group, but also with what I've, and what does that actually mean to you? What's that in?
Footwork.
So, oh yeah, so it's tracking, footwork, and then the hit, the adjusting the body height. Resonated with them that we've spoken about so far, that you're okay, I'm actually going to do something with this, and what is it? Is anybody happy to share? It works far better when we do share. I'll just let you know that. Said earlier about the answers. The answers are in this room.
I think the bit for me was the why. You know, in terms of when you're putting a training session together or whatever it is. Why are we doing this? What is the impact it's going to have on the field? And then we had an interesting discussion around the two-way dialogue between that being, you know, a coach using some of their skills, particularly if they're the lower the age group you're playing, probably the more the coach is inputting in terms of that. But as players get older, we talked about the players talking about what style do we want to play, how do we want to play, what does this group want to stand for in terms of, and it becomes more of a tool. And I guess perfection of the coach is when you're just asking questions and they're providing the answers to themselves, isn't it?
That's part of telltale hospital.
Yeah.
Move through those.
Yeah. Sometimes it's not always possible a bunch of 17-year-old boys to just look back at them and go, whoa. And you're like, I'm fed up with asking you questions, let's just go play a game.
I think sometimes, in my experience, I have been there and I've stood in front. What I found though is, if I ask too many questions and if I ask too many directed questions, that's when they get bored. What can we improve on? Communication. I mean, you know, they get bored because the questions sometimes we ask aren't challenging enough. And I wonder sometimes if we can be less directive. So I try to think about questions in two ways. Am I probing or am I prompting?
Yeah.
And I wonder sometimes, do we ask enough probing questions, which may encourage them to think about it? The second thing I would say is, how many times have you asked a question and not got an answer, and then started probing to get an answer?
Or tell them the answer.
Or that. So we're leading them through the questionings. I wonder sometimes if you just went, I tell you what guys, we haven't got the answer yet, let's go back and play. I'm going to ask the same question in a minute.
Converse, just we finished and I got asked if we'd ever done anything like that in my group. Not enough as we should have done over the years probably, but we had a real problem with discipline around under 15s level. So we had an indoor session and we did an alternative, their version of treads. So I read the right act a little bit and said this is the consequences of, you know, what you need to understand as a group of young men is, these are the consequences if we carry on down this path. We have to correct this. I want you to correct it. It's got to come from you guys, otherwise we're wasting our time. And they did an alternative version of tricks. I can't remember, I've got a picture of it somewhere. It was excellent. And the buy-in for the next 6 to 8 weeks was fantastic. And we resolved the problem. And then we got on the right path. But during the middle of that, there were 3 of them, because when their group went, sometimes we just want to tell them what to do. Sometimes we just want to tell them what to do. We don't want a question, we don't want to ask. We want you as the coach to tell us how to do it better and just show us how to do it. So, brilliant, I agree fully. But I think that, I also think in a way, if it's a player-centred approach, you've got to adapt to the ones that want telling and the ones that grow into being able to pro. And I think that's the real challenge.
Yeah, I would say the challenge there is understanding when tell is the right thing.
But some individuals just like tell full stop. And you eventually build that relationship, you can probe a bit with them. For me, that's when you co-coach them, because they don't like telling you that they want. They don't like an open, they're not confident talking to a group like this. But you co-coach them on the pitch, and you can go and have a create dialogue. But sometimes it takes a few weeks, and then you can actually get into that probing and have more valuable conversation.
I think it's an interesting one about, so you are right about personality traits what people want, but it's encouraging them to find out. I've coached an international player who genuinely wore a headguard, female player, and she turned around to me and went, "That's great, Chris, just tell me what to fucking do." Yeah. And I'm like, okay, run the short line that you do, and then I go, "Why do you run that well?" "Oh, because I get on somebody's outside shoulder, and then I cut real well." "Alright, so that's a strength of yours. So what else?" "Oh, I don't like dropping." So you do actually know what, you do have choice. The reality is you play to your super strengths, but certain people work in different ways. I think with young men, predominantly, the cop-out is, and Martin talked about the point about how long people wait. The average teacher waits 0.75 of a second after asking a question before prompting. So kids are better than you. So 5 lessons a day, someone tells them what to do. So they just know, do you know what, I'll sit back and you'll tell me the answer and I can get back playing. So how do we create the opportunities to do that and probe, and then work out what an individual needs to get them to be better at opening up and sharing. If you watch your groups, most of the kids have an opinion on the field. They might not share it with you, but they'll go and share it with the colleague. Yeah. Well, you don't have to watch the ones, you know, sometimes the player that's the quietest, the one who's the quietest to you often is the most vocal with a group of players. Yeah. So it's how you get that to work out.
So the interesting thing, I think, which a little bit unique to junior male players as well, is that sometimes, and again, it's sort of learned behaviour from the classroom, when they're in a group of their peers, they don't want to step forward and vocalise or have an opinion because they feel strength from being part of the group. And they, like in class, an intelligent young lad won't put his hand up and answer the questions because he doesn't want to be seen to be a geek, and so they dumb themselves down. It can be different in rugby, but there's a group in your squad that are like that. They don't want to be seen to be.
You got asked 2 questions at the beginning of the session by Martin and none of you offered an answer. You put you in groups, you couldn't show up.
Well, yeah, true.
And that was going to be my next point is, quite often our feedback huddles are coach driven. And I wonder how often we go, guys, we're not solving that problem. Get yourself into groups of 4, have a quick conversation, you come back in, we're going to try one of those things that you guys come up with. Because coach is all about control. We quite often, and these are my own learnt experiences, I did that. I wanted to control everything. I wanted parents and I wanted everybody else to see that I was in control. But actually, you're never in control.
It's like you were saying though, when we did the jigsaws, all the answers in the room. With your group of players, they've got all the answers.
They may not be able to. They might not be able to do it.
They're playing the game. We're not playing the game. So they've got the answers. All we're there to do is try and get them to identify the answers.
I think so, and it's. I mean, look, there are many different strategies to do that. You know, we're not saying one is better than another. There are many different strategies, and different times, different places. But 2 of the things that I think I've probably, there are 2 things that I try. Number 1 is that small groups. They will talk. They will come back in, but you need a sense of direction. So you bring them back in. Okay, what's the one that we're going to try? There's the 4 answers. Which is the one that we're going to work on? So we'll all get back onto that same shared page again. Okay, did that work? No. Okay, what's the next one we're going to try then?
I think if you adopt that approach early in player development, you breed better decision makers later on. Because we were saying one of the attractions of the game of rugby is it's a game of decision making, right? Do I run, pass, kick? Do I carry? Do I ruck? Do I board? It's a constant game of decision making. And the earlier you get your players to take responsibility, the less you need to do come game time, because they've identified they're a big set of forwards who are going to go wide, or whatever. They're problem solving themselves. Otherwise, you just end up with them looking at the sidelines, while you're shouting, telling us what to do, because I can't think for myself.
Yeah, I mean, there's some phrases in rugby or phrases in sports coaching which irritate me a little bit. Empower my players. Well, I've never been in power. They've always been the power. The only power I've got is selection. Everything else is theirs. They're the people that do things, not me. So I always challenge that question as I don't want to empower my players. My players are already empowered because they run the game. My job is to help them see things differently. And that's why I come back to is all of us will see the game differently. Put your hands up if you were a forward. So there's about 4 backs in here. The rest of us are all... So straight away, when we look at the game, we will see through the eyes that we played. Our experiences are, mine was a front row player. I had no idea what the backs were doing because my head was always stuck down here. So I had to go away and learn some stuff because I just couldn't see through a lens of a back.
I think it's worth adding that. It's like your values, your personal values. So I was an average, different colour, but an average player, leach tackle, hang on, somebody will get there and Otley. But I'll work hard. So you see players, so their work ethic is really important to me. But if I've got a really classy player that's got a poor work ethic, I can't see it. So my assistant's job was to actually go, actually, they've got it. So less about flair, more about doing the right things well. And he's like, hang on, they've got this. So when you're looking at selection, he's like, well, yeah, but no, they offer something different. So mine is quite about the lens you look through has a massive impact, and the people you surround yourself through. It's really easy to find 5 people that think like you, but then that doesn't really give you a creative team. So how do you challenge yourself to do it differently as a coach? So it makes it feel uncomfortable. Like, I give you the example of the conversation. You made a great point about young people. Classic is when you stand at the front and they don't answer, what's your immediate response as a coach? It feels uncomfortable to you. You feel like the session's not happening like you want. It might be -3, but what you do is you tend to jump in and fix it. Definitely
going to be -3 up Yorkshire. Back in Sussex, it doesn't get to -3 ever.
Unconscious bias.
It is, and it is. It's there. It exists, and there are ways. There are definitely ways to do things. Right. Well, anybody else want to share? Sorry, we kind of some great conversation around that, and really, really important how we engage and how we create in that learning environment.
Quite a specific thing for me, Tax, was just I don't think we spend enough time tackling because I'm worried about what impact it can have in terms of players having contact, essentially. But I'm just thinking the way you broke that down in school, we could probably just spend more time doing the tracking and the footwork and get him into a semi-contact on that basis, because we've talked a lot in our group about the touch and pass game is breeding too many bad habits of wavy arms rather than actually people being in a position where they could tackle. So I think we could definitely do more on that idea to
or you can, as you referred to, you could do work on what you're doing before that you make the tackle. So can you connect in a group of 2 or 3 and go up together and apply pressure, looking at where the ball is, looking at where the players are, that kind of thing. And then you're not actually making a tackle, but you're still putting them under pressure.
So where does the injury occur in your game?
Sorry?
Where does the so we had developed something in my Apple League. So we created something called shot to stop, because actually the injury is not in the contact, it's when you put somebody on the floor.
Yeah.
So actually you can do quite a lot of physicality, you both know it, present. So the things you talked about and Andy talked about, footwork of it. So it's adapting what works for you in your sport, isn't it? Actually most of it gets hurt when you put them on the floor.
Yeah.
So actually we did it, and then condition it so it's if you don't have an initial one in contact, then you can't add an additional player in. So what you don't get is somebody grabbing and somebody cleaning them out and chopping them. So how do you adapt based on your age to meet the sport outcomes that you want to achieve in the session?
It comes back to, and we will definitely touch on this in this next phase around planning. So we've now got a curriculum. How do we actually place that in? I learned very, very quickly when you've got a small squad, the more contact you do, the less squad you've got. The best ability is availability. It's a fact. If I haven't got 15 players to put on the park, no matter how good you are, does it? So you have to start to recognise what are the things that I can do within my environment, what are the things I can control without compromising myself over here. So yes, our guys, in order to be game ready, my guys need to do some kind of contact. But what I can do is control what that contact looks like and how much of it there is. So all of us will make compromise points. In order for them to be game ready, I need to make sure they're safe. How do I do that? Footwork, tracking, things that don't need a lot of contact, wrestling, grappling. And then the smaller little games, we'll do 10 minutes of shoulders on. We don't complete tackle, we'll just do shoulders on. So, and all I'm looking for is, are they tracking effectively? Are they using their feet to get close? Are they making contact with a shoulder?
I think that's when, for me, one of the most important parts of this is that bottom right-hand box of yours.
I'll blow that one up for you as well, guys, just that you get that.
Because once if you've got your players aligned about that, because one of the things obviously, particularly in the junior game, quite often time constrained. You've got an hour on the pitch and there's another age group on after you, or the club's eyed it for 2 hours and there's another organisation on after you. So if you could explain, right, we're focusing on these 3 things this session, that really helps to cement for the players, right, that I need to switch into that.
I think I fed you really, really nicely to segue into this next piece, because it is really, really important that we decide what the purpose of a session is. Because unless we understand the purpose of what we're going out there for, and the problem is when we're kind of slightly probably more inexperienced as a coach, what we tend to do is we look at this game, where we come back to that game model. There's a load of moments happening in that game, aren't there? There's probably a catch, a carry, potentially a kick, a contest, a jackal, whatever that looks like, all within the space of about 30 seconds. And you'll see probably 4 out of those 5 things that I just talked about, all within 30 seconds of a game. And you're sitting there going, well, okay, how am I going to prioritise? What is important to help them learn today? And then what we'll all start doing is we talk about that questioning skills and that. I stay true to a task. So if my task is this, I'm only going to ask questions on what the task is. I may see something else, but I park it. Because if I can keep all my players focused on this is what the session purpose is, here's what we said we're all going to agree what good looks like, my questioning is all around the task. Because I think it's important that players, if you keep that kind of a context to how you coach, your players then know what you're looking for. It's far easier for them to answer then. Because I know it's going to be about, if we're talking about the tackle, I know you're going to ask a question, it's going to be about the tackle. Therefore, I haven't got to think too deeply about, did I run, did I catch? It was 5 minutes ago, coach. I haven't got a clue what I did 30 seconds ago, let alone 5 minutes. I know that you're going to ask about footwork. I know you're going to ask about tracking. I can stay focused. It just helps players as well. And I think that's really, really quite important. Cool, so this is very, very busy. This is just post-COVID. This is where I got to with the club that I'm coaching at currently. So I have no problem if you want to get up and walk down here just so you can read it. Those of you at the back who can see it without standing up, well done. It certainly wouldn't be me. So ultimately, Andy will be very, very familiar with this because the Abraham here is obviously Andy, who helped come up with this system. So I think, Chris, I don't know whether you actually put this on the UK coaching website, around 2018, I think it was. An interview with Julian North and, was it Andy? Was it you and Julian North? This was the first time that I saw this and it really resonated with me. But actually, I can start to look at longer term plan, medium term planning and short term planning all in the same space. So if we take a look up the top, there are 3 years worth of work. So there's year 1, year 2, year 3, but some clear objectives that we as a club set. We wanted to try and get back to 2 adult teams. God, imagine how many of your clubs are still in that space now, 2 adult teams. There are some big clubs up here which probably don't struggle, but We certainly did. And I really wanted to make sure that that transition and that understanding of, I wasn't going to tell the coaches at coach level what to coach and how to coach. We were going to have a shared model. We were going to have some shared curriculum. It was down to them how they did it. So the reason why those 2 red arrows come out is because we're actually in year 2 of this 3-year. There was a 4th year, but we kept it out in case we wanted to adapt it. So at the beginning of this season, we said these were the 4 things that we wanted to ensure by the end of the season we would achieve. I talked earlier about that squad rotation. We wanted to identify 5 colts that would be with us on a more regular basis. We never took one on their own, we always took 2. That meant sometimes 2 senior players having to go drop out. The other thing we did was all of those senior players, we all warmed up. Whoever was available, we all warmed up together. Unless they decided to take a week off and do something different, but we all warmed up. So sometimes we were having 28 players to the warm-up. We only had 18 on that we were allowed to select, but we had 24 players doing the warm-up. Because we created this sense of belonging. And then we just worked it down so the weeks 1 to 8 very much pre-season, leading into the first kind of games. Weeks 9 to 18, that first half of the season. And that's 17 to 34 as we navigate our way through. We were quite clear in what we wanted to try and achieve in each of those blocks, based on where they were currently. So what were the skill sets that they had that we could build on? What were the things they didn't have that we wanted to develop? Now, its simplest one ever is there isn't a player out there that can't improve catch pass. So where does catch pass fit within your priorities? How important is it? If it's really, really important, it should be in every session. How many of us use Game Zone, Skill Zone effectively to do that? A lot of us will do a lot of stuff in games. We don't necessarily always strip it out to a really small-sided game or even just some simple handling practices just to put it under pressure. There are different ways to apply pressure in hands, just in simple handling exercises. And then we break that down into, so what does that look like for week 1 through to 12 on there? Those are the focuses that we were gonna do. Any questions? I'm hoping a lot of you can see some connection in there to what we talked about, how we wanted the game and the language that they used.
This might sound like a stupid question, Tags, but you've got Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday there. If you took one training session out a week, do you just literally halve the content?
Good question. What were we doing here?
We've got 1 hour training and then fixture on the Sunday.
And you play every Sunday?
Not every Sunday, but most Sundays.
So playing's the thing. You don't train unless you're going to play, do you? If you're a kid, you wouldn't train if you were never going to play.
Occasionally do Sunday training if you've got fixtures, but you don't get to
Yeah, if we don't have fixture, we'll train.
Exactly. That's the reality of it, isn't it? The kids train because they want to play.
Yeah.
So what would you do?
I think you can do certain activities that you can almost start simple things like you've got a load of catch pass and warm ups, you put movement patterns into your warm ups. So some of those physical things you can take into the warm up so that in your hour and a quarter, however long your sessions are, then it's easy to knee-jerk reaction from week to week, like the line-up was very good this week, let's spend half an hour on the line-up. And then you'll find 3 weeks later you can't tackle anymore, and then 3 weeks later, and then you find you can't pass to that team.
You've just described my early coaching experiences. It's exactly what I used to do.
But everyone knows, all the kids know why they're doing that if it didn't go very well. So there is a benefit to, oh, the line didn't go well, we'll do some more of the line out. Because they know why they're doing it. And immediately answers that question for them.
Here's a question that I'm just going to pose there, just a slightly different view on that. How much is it your players couldn't do it or the opposition stopped you from doing it?
Well, we'll discuss that as well.
Good question.
Because quite often we evaluate our performance against a team that's worse than us. And we assume the team is worse than us. Very rarely do we look at what we've just done on a Saturday against a team that's better than us.
Well, no, I mean, actually, that happened with our line out. They were beating us all the time, so we were trying to go to 3 or to 4, and they're just up at 2 and getting us right. We're just going to get up to 2, up, down, get the ball out. We've got to get 2, otherwise we can't go any further.
So ultimately, it's that. It's, do I need to now go away and focus? So an example might be something really, really simple. We have try and think of something. 2 pass penetrate game. That's going to be our basic game plan. 2 passes, you're going to try and penetrate. That's our basic game plan. They've got a really, really quick defence, very well connected, really well organised. They stop that penetration. The following week, we're going to still work on that 2 pass penetrate. Well, actually, it wasn't the 2 pass penetrate that was the issue. It's the fact that they were really, really good at this and stopped us from doing it. They denied us that opportunity. It's not the fact we were poor. It's the fact that we're really, really good. And I think sometimes we need to evaluate things through the lens that it needs to be seen through, not through the lens that we think.
That's one of the difficulties, isn't it? That staying true to the path that you've described, because particularly, most people I think in here, junior, the difference between Team A and Team B and Team C, week on week, is massive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're constantly responding to what you see on a Sunday, you'll just be trying to beat last week's team and not play next week's game.
100%. And that's where I try to remain true. So in answer to your question, Andy, is I would prioritise differently. I'm able to prioritise that way because of the time that I have with the people. And by the way, whilst we do Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, it doesn't mean to say everybody's there Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. There are weeks when you've got 11 and there are weeks when you've got 28.
One of the challenges in junior rugby is you might have kids coming together playing from different schools, and they're then being coached differently. So they get a lot of mixed messages in terms of, well, in this school, this group of kids do this, but the other group that join you do this. And then you want your own identity as well. So that's hard to deliver, right? With a team that's the same team every week, coming to Tracy Tuesday, Thursday, add the complications of once a week. One set of kids coming one week, different set of kids coming the following week, all full of different ideas. For me, then, you've got to really strip it back down to something very simple.
Okay, so there are 2 things there you said that I think are fundamental. Number 1 is all being on the same page. So I look at a child, I look at an average, let's take a teenage girl at school who plays netball, hockey, may have a little bit of cricket, maybe doing a little bit of athletics, and comes down to you and plays rugby. They can bounce between 5 sports and understand the differences. So I struggle to understand the concept. They can't bounce between different environments and see different things. They make errors, of course they make errors. But they'll only make errors based on decision making as to what you want versus what somebody else wants. The game of rugby is still the game of rugby. The only error they'll make is structure. If you put too much structure in place, that's when the errors start to occur, because the game's still the same. Fundamentally, catch, pass, run. Can't go anywhere, kick.
I was going to say, Rich, it's been interesting because we've had that same thing. I think we've got one school that doesn't play, 2, 3. I think we've got 4 or 5 schools represented in ours. And there's been times actually that because of that, they brought a solution into the training where I've gone, okay, well let's just do that. Then if you're used to doing that, let's just keep doing that then. But I think there's also the greater hot fuzz, the greater good. Actually, having them experience lots of different things is actually potentially better for them in the long run. So that was the other thing I was going to say about that for me is that's based on players who already know stuff.
Yeah, it is.
And then you've got players who don't know stuff and need to learn stuff. And
It was mirrored by a movement break. So a movement break would be, so if we're talking about carry, evasion's quite important. So how am I developing my ability to evade? So water break was always mirrored with a movement break. Not for very long, couple of minutes, just a quick little bit of movement back into the game. So how am I developing my athletic skills at the same time? My training activity, kick-ass 3 was the game that we decided on, so it starts with a kick into backfield and then you counter-attack. Overload attack, why? Because I wanted some success. I'd increased that pressure by taking away the overload as I went. My engagement, so those are the things, said to you earlier about time on task. Pressure dial, is this easy, is it hard? How am I adjusting my practice to make that look better? And my feedback loops, individual or team. A little thing that I have in my head is me, mate, team. So can the player themselves identify and give me good feedback? If a player's struggling, is a teammate helping him? If the player's struggling, the team are struggling, that's a mate time. That's all coming. So just little processes that I know I plan for. So that's that player first, team second, coach last. I never have an input until I've provided those opportunities. Does the player have opportunity to solve this? They're not solving it. I'm going to create an opportunity. In you come, guys, just in your teams, just have a little chat about what you're doing. Right, it's still not working. That's time for me to come in and maybe do some probing. And then the last one is always ensure action follows feedback. Again, this is a personal action of mine. I noticed that I would review an attack and then go, right, okay, you're now defending. So all of that lovely reflection we've just spent doing, they now don't get a chance to do because I've shifted them to the defensive side. I'm sure we all do similar things to that, but it's something I noticed I was doing. So it's in my plan. I need to make sure following any kind of feedback is right. You've got 2 minutes to play. Let's see if we can solve it before we transition.
I'll give them a replay. Do it again. Yeah.
So that's how I'm starting to try and structure my sessions. I think about what's the purpose, what's the activity that helps that purpose, how am I going to engage with the people, and what are the things I'm going to do as a person. Bottom two to me are probably the most important. The training activity, you've probably got loads of banks of games and things in your head that you do for things. I won't touch too much on this, but it's just my own personal way of trying to focus on my sessions. So I try to always go through this something I've kind of developed for myself on the bigger part is I have a purpose for the session. Yeah. I then apply some constraints to that session. I then go into a condition game or an adaptive game. Now I use those two things slightly differently. I'll talk about that later or another time. I use scan, act, adapt myself. So not only am I asking the players to do it, I do that myself. I stand back and go, okay, what am I seeing? Do I need to act? Does the act need to be just a little bit of feedback, positive or quick little hot review? What we're seeing there? Reece, what did you do there? Nice, yeah, like that. Or is it, I need to adapt this, it's not quite working. I need to bring people in, or I need to change the practice to make it easier or harder. So it's just a process that I have in my head all the time. And I use those 4 things. Change the rules, change the playing area, manipulate the player, or manipulate the number of players. So manipulate the player, I might put a task on you. I want to see how many times today you can kick and find grass in behind the winger. So I'll place a specific constraint on you as a player. Make sense? That's pretty much it from a slides perspective. Quite happy to open the floor up to any other kind of conversations, but I'm hoping that through this journey, we've gone from the answers are all in the room. Probably need to talk a little bit more. Never easy, I get that. But evenings like this are just really, really critical to that. Sharing experiences, sharing views. Second thing we talked about, fundamentally being on the same page. That's you, your fellow coaches and the players that you're working with. Really nice if you can share it up and down. How many of you as coaches, when you went up a year, wished the person above you had said something to you? Because it's quite interesting, isn't it? We always turn and go, I would have loved to have known what the under-10s or the under-12s did last year, but you don't ever then go back and tell the year group below you. You think it about the person above you, but you never feed it back underneath you. Been there. My experience is exactly the same as yours. The answers are in the room.
It's a bit like that on the pathway. Sorry to flow, but on the girls' pathway, the centre of excellence, they're starting to mature, and a bit like the boys' academies now, is what which are a lot more mature than the girls. And then the girls' DPP kind of just emerging now, starting to find its feet. The centre of excellence need to come back down.
I think so. There's a big difference between understanding what the game looks like at the level above and trying to do the same as them. That's not. What we've got to try and think about is that age and stage. What is it here that gets them ready for the next stage? It's not doing the same as it, but dumbing it down. It's being really, really specific on what you need to do in your environment to make them better. And I think sometimes we all get hooked up on that bit above. One eye on it, of course. I always have one eye on it. This is what they're likely to be doing when they get there. Right, okay, how do I prepare them for it when they get there? I don't do that. I prepare them for it. There's a big difference between those two things.
I think we've talked about being realistic about what you can do in the time you've got. So we've talked about an hour a week. So I know for our age group, I don't think we start doing midweek training until under 11s maybe, might be under 10s, under 11s. So ultimately it was a Sunday morning. And I think part of this is, you're going back to what you had in terms of that nested idea, was that's on the basis of probably some fairly good players in there as well, and how long they've been playing the game, and just having some sense of realism of what can we achieve. And we've talked about in the group here at Otley is that if you look at the number of hours, if we have probably 30-ish weeks, 32, 33 weeks, then you take out the weeks where it's too wet, too cold, Christmas. And actually, when you break it down, you could be somewhere in the region of between 60 and 100 hours if you're lucky, in terms of the amount of time you might actually have with someone. And it's very little time. I think that comes back to me about why actually having a minis plan, a juniors plan, a Colts plan, and so on is not a bad idea. And then recognising that, going back to what you're saying, Rich, about people are playing at different schools as well, and I still remember to this day one of our players who did a cut, as in an inside and out, and I looked at him going, we have never done that ever in any of our sessions. Where the hell have you learned how to do that? It probably helped that this was Isaac Gilson, he's got two older brothers, so he presumed he's doing something. But to this day, I still don't know where he learned how to do that. And but there's so much that they are learning outside what we do with them.
That's what I was going to say, Andrew, particularly as they get older. Yes, you might only have them for an hour, right? But they go to the gym, right? Yeah. So you just make sure that they're doing the right stuff at the gym. Or if you've got, like we've got now a group, they'll go and play touch and pass, right? We gave them all a ball at the end of last season and said, just go and play around with the ball and just see how it bounces. So there's a million and one things that you can get them to do. Now, you'll have different, you'll know as well as we do, some players don't think about rugby from the minute a session ends to the game.
Does he even think of it then? Does he even think about it then?
100%.
Whereas there are some who eat, drink,
Yeah,
sleep,
yeah, yeah.
and are obsessed by the game, and you've got to manage.
100%, you know, even in, you know, we talk about my environment. I've got one of the players I work with is in one of the academies, under 18 academies. Potentially will get a contract at the end of this year. I have that person in my squad, and I have the other guy in my squad who thinks nothing of going out with his missus, having a lovely meal and drinking 5 pints of beer on a Friday night.
It's because he's got a game the next day.
Game next day.
I thought you were going to say Saturday lunch.
Fundamentally, those, you know, we all work in that space where different people have different motivations for being there, but we can hook them into the same thing. The thing that gets them there is the game of rugby. What we tend to do is then overcomplicate, which is why I come back to that. If we all understand what are the priorities, what do we as a team agree are the priorities? We just really kind of drill into and keep, I'm just going to focus on these priorities. What are the priorities for us? And they move and they adapt. But the one thing that a bit of advice I would probably say is, they're ready when they're ready, not when you're ready. They're ready to move on when they are ready.
That's what I was going to say. Whilst you got your, I mean, we call it a season plan that we have, and it's probably not as detailed as yours. We start at a higher level, and then each block we go into a bit more detail, but it's just a plan.
It's just a plan.
So if you don't tick everything in that block,
What did Mike Tyson say?
you might.
Everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but it.
Pretty true, isn't it?
But again, to your point, Andrew, it's better to have a plan than no plan, especially when you're looking at the length of time you've got across a number of age groups. So if everyone's got a plan that's, you know, it can be connected at some level, whether it's right at the top level,
I think so, isn't it?
then at least somebody, you know, at least you're working in the same direction.
The other famous planning phrase is planning is everything, but the plan is nothing.
Yeah.
So you might have developed your plan to the nth degree, but by developing your plan, you've thought through all the factors, you've thought through all the options, and then if you have to say, well, look, actually, what we thought we were going to do in block 8, we'll have to do in block 3, and block 2 becomes block 5, but you've thought through the factors and the considerations and the tasks, and then you can mess with it.
I think that to me is the fundamental point, is that it's coming back to, so I said earlier, everybody sees the game through a different lens. Some people will have attack, some people will have defence, people will feel more comfortable coaching one or the other. Me, I'm all about scoring tries, that's why it was right at the top. Purpose of the game is to score more points than the opposition. So I'm going to focus on some attack stuff. So I prioritise attack. Because the other thing that I factor in is that not all of my adults want to tackle. When they've got big person running at them with speed from distance, doesn't mean that much to me. I've got to get up for work on Monday morning. That's the reality. So I factor that in. Okay, well, if I understand that, I understand it. I'm never going to change that. If I can make him more competent and more able and ensure he's safe, I've done my job in that space. So let's just work on the attack. So we prioritise that. That's the lens we see the game through. You'll go to other clubs and see a lens through defence. That's the beauty of this game. Any other questions, thoughts? And we can convene at the bar and have a beer. And
Well, we can firstly thank Tags for providing us such an insightful set of ideas. And coming up from Staffordshire, I know you've got a master session tomorrow. So
I have
it's not
indeed.
just that, and we're going for a curry as well. Anyone who wants to go for a curry, feel free to join us. We're going up to Red Pepper. But thanks very much, Tags. It's really good of you.
Pleasure.